Well, we're going to talk about Maud Gatewood tonight, so I'm going to get right into it. And I'm going to start by showing you an image you've never seen before of Maud. Nothing like it. And does anybody know why? There's no cigarette. I think this is the only one. After that, they're all lit up. But she's quite the intriguing woman. She's the hero of today's talk. I want to tell you that I knew Maud. I used to visit her at her house in Chapel Hill. And because we're going to talk about cigarettes for just a second. And Maud is the only person I know in my life who had taken cigarettes and strategically placed them around the house so that when one ran out, there was another one there. And she'd pick it up. So this was my first impression of her, is that this is a serious person. She knows what she wants and she's going to have it. So we would sit there and talk about art. And we would talk about women's college, right, which is the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, used to be a women's college. And one day I brought a tape recorder because Maud was telling me things, I was not going to remember. So I had a tape recorder, and we sat down in her living room. And, she's just looking at me, right? She scared me, right? I mean, can I say that? It's fair. And so she had this, I had the tape recorder going, and she took a great big drag, and she pointed at it and said, "Is that damn thing on?" I said, "Yes, Maud." I hadn't felt like this since Nuns when I was a kid. All right, it was such a flashback. And I said, "Yes." And she just reached over and bam, hit it. And that did it. It went off. And she's now I'm going to tell you a story. And you are never going to repeat it. So she told me this story. And I felt like I was 8, maybe 9, because my eyes, I could feel them going like this. And she told me this story. It was so outrageous. And it was about Greg Ivey, the founder of the Weatherspoon Art Museum and her teacher at the Weatherspoon. And so she finished the story, took a puff, pointed at me, and she said, "Now you can turn that damn thing back on." So I did. And now you're all wondering, what was the story? Right? So listen, I have never told anybody. And I'll tell you why. Because Maud's dead, right? But I feel like if I tell the story, something bad is going to happen to me. I look around and it's like, I'm not taking that risk. But that is the kind of power she had, at least over me, and I know over certain others in person. And we're going to talk about her today, and I'm going to be making a number of observations. Some of these are going to be sweeping and general and arguable. Maud herself might say, "Look, I don't have any regrets. You can talk about me plenty when I'm gone." And that's the spirit of tonight's talk. We're going to talk about her plenty, and she's gone. And so as I offer up these observations, what I'm going to be focusing on is where I feel Maud sort of fits in the grander scheme of American art. Not just within the confines of Greensboro or North Carolina or the South, but really in the context of how she looks among her American peers. And there needs to be more talk in that direction, and tonight is, I don't know if it's exactly a start, but we're moving in that direction. First thing we need to know about Maud is that she arrives as a student at Women's College. She's just 17. All right, she gets there early. She gets there in 1950, and the Weatherspoon had just purchased this painting by de Kooning. Now, it's hard to imagine now from the vantage point of 2024, because I think that's what year it is, right? 2024. What a scandal this was. Because this is a women's college where everybody dresses up in white and lace on Sundays and goes to services on campus. And this is an exploding naked woman. Not exactly the image of the co-ed attending women's college. And she's got teeth. And she looks angry. And she's kind of hyper-sexualized on top of that. And so Maud, however, the story goes, was so excited to get this painting, she was tasked with opening the crate. She about put her foot through it. That is the story. Some of her fellow students said that's just not true. But I kind of tend to think it was. Because Maud was excited about de Kooning. There's going to be a de Kooning here on the campus. And he's a great painter. She wanted to know why. And she was going to find out why, and she was going to look. And so the acquisition of this painting says something about, what Maud had available to her. Women's college at the time, the first thing somebody would think, and here I'm thinking mainly Yankees, would think is that if you had women at a women's college in 1950 in Greensboro, North Carolina, they're isolated, right? They don't know anything. They're in the boondocks, behind this cloistered wall. In point of fact, Women's College had one of the few bona fide modern artists in the country teaching at a women's college. And had an art collection that was actively buying contemporary art and using it to teach with. And on top of that, Greg Ivy, in addition to buying this stuff, was bringing modern artists to Women's College in person. And that would include Albers, Joseph Albers, who was at Black Mountain, Albers' wife, Annie, who was important, Franz Klein. All these guys came to Women's College and talked to the students. So I'm going to say Maud was well positioned to get a head start in the art world by going to Women's College, not being held back by Women's College. Arguable, but I would win. Franz Klein comes to Women's College. Maud knows he's coming. So she goes to her studio, her little studio, right? And she paints the best Franz Klein that she can come up with. And Franz Klein, she gets a critique from Franz Klein. I mean, the world is just funny, isn't it? It's just like, you can't make this stuff up. So she brings her painting, and Franz Klein, they're smoking. And he's looking at the painting, and he said, that is a fantastic Franz Klein. But what about you? What are you going to do? So Maud told me this story, and she wasn't embarrassed to tell me at all. She was glad it happened because she needed to be jump-started into art is not copying, right? Art is going to be this journey where you find out what it is you're going to express. So she found that out early, and she found it out from Franz Klein in Greensboro, North Carolina. I mean, that's a New York story, right? So here she is in 1952. She's still a student and very much trying to figure out what painting is about. So she looks a little Black Mountainish, but with a lot of Greg Ivy palette thrown in there, and Ivy's use of heavy black line. She's got a mix of things going on here, and that's part of what it means to be a student. You're looking at a lot of things, you're experiencing a lot of different approaches. Maud is no different. But this is 1952. I'm going to go out on a limb and say a very conservative time in America. And just to paint abstractly, you were a dangerous person, right? I mean, abstraction was what those people did over there, It wasn't a necessarily American approach, right? But Maud jumps into this, both feet, she's right in the mix. But clearly doesn't know yet who she's going to be. And this is Maud next to her teacher, Greg Ivy. And when I talk about the use of the heavy black line, you see it so clearly in the palette. There are other comparisons I could have made that would have been closer, but this one suits. She's obviously looking at him very, very closely. I wanted to show you the cover of this book because I wrote it. And I did. So I don't get royalties, but I wish I did. It's important to know a little bit about Ivy and the influence he had on his students because Ivy was a real modernist. I mean, he walked the walk. What he taught students was, look, a lot of you are never going to be painters. You're never going to be sculptors. But you can lead a creative life. You can lead an adventurous life. You can lead a life asking questions and looking for innovative solutions. That's what you can be every day of your life. And the students were this was all new to them. And he was very much, don't worry about rules, worry about thinking. And students were always whispering things about Ivy. And they told me the things that were whispered. And among the things whispered about him was, he has Jewish friends. He's had lunch with black people. Ivy, he had Jewish friends. He had lunch with African Americans in town. That wasn't a typical thing in the South at the time. And so Ivy would tell his students, art is not about garnering fame. It's not about making money. It's not about leaving a legacy. Art is about enlivening the space you're in, the community you're in. You can amplify it, energize it, enliven it by the way you think and what you do. So students got over the fact that he had these social failings. This is a Greg Ivy in 1949, public hearing. And this is a piece that he showed. Now, you don't have to be Fellini to figure out this painting, right? You have a petri dish, and you have, a couple of cells in it, what I think are embryos in the petri dish. And you have one black hand and one light-colored hand, but they're conjoined, right, next to the petri dish. Like, this is an experiment where skin colors come together. So what is he talking about? He's talking about the future of the world is going to be a blending of ideas and people. That's the future. He wasn't wrong. But this painting, if anybody really looked at it in 1949, it might have gotten him fired, I suspect. He painted it anyway. This is the kind of person that Ivy was. He did eventually get in some trouble. Now, back to our hero, Maud Gatewood. 1960, Maud Gatewood gives us a very forceful image of race relations in the South in 1960, right? Before Woolworths, before the March on Washington. 1960, it's early in the scheme of things, or in the middle of the civil rights movement, certainly. And you have two white figures in a cafe looking one way, and the black figure has to look, or we see him looking the other way. And they're separated literally by a wall. And the whole scene is enveloped in darkness. Nobody seems to talk. Everybody seems quiet, sullen, moody. And I look at it and I think enigmatic. I mean, they are in the same place. Is there a chance these guys know each other? I mean, what's happening? Is this the prelude to confrontation because they're separated? I mean, and this is an early example of seeing the best of Maud Gatewood. I think there's enigma and a powerful presentation of enigma. I mean, the strokes are lush and thick and dark and dreamy and moody and swamp-like. And you get sucked into it. It's almost like being in the South in 1950 or 60. You just feel that swampy heat of the moment, the darkness of the moment. I look at this and I just can't help but think Truman Capote, I do. My mind just goes places. I think it's a tremendous image for a young artist to paint, but especially a young artist who is in the middle of it. She doesn't shy away from an accurate and a penetrating representation of it. She does not retreat from it. And it's not an older man painting this. It is a young woman looking clear-eyed at this. This is David Park, probably an artist you've never heard of. He's off on the West Coast doing most of his work. He's part of a group of California artists that are called the Bay Area Figurative Abstractionists. Maud knows about these guys. How does Maud know about these things? Ivy gets his students to read art journals, look at art journals, know what's going on in the world, and go to art shows. Maud goes to art shows. She reads art journals. Eventually, she travels the entire world. And she looks at people like David Park, and they are finding a balance between the fury of de Kooning's abstraction and a figurative approach that is tighter and more sort of traditional. They're blending that a bit. And he sees in David Park somebody who can create really successful atmospheres, moody atmospheres with minimal means. And I think this is the kind of thing she was looking at right before she painted her 1960 painting. Good examples. But she succeeds. She doesn't copy David Park, but she succeeds in working in a similar way. It's figurative, but with a lot of abstraction thrown in, a lot of looseness, a lot of simplicity, a lot of getting rid of detail. Okay? And Americans at mid-century take this to the bank. It is a fact. Believed that the more detail you had in a work, the better you were. The more it looked like a photograph, the better you were, obviously. Okay, second fact, Americans have not changed much. That is the truth. Okay, so this in 1949 was really radical stuff. Make no mistake about it. You painted like this, I mean, your family would disown you. People in schools would say, do you want to keep your job? All that kind of stuff. And so Maud wasn't interested in that. She was interested in the efficacy of the painting. How does it become strong? How does it become poetic? How does it convey this mood that I'm feeling? So here's another David Park next to Maud. And you see, in terms of their approach to the space, the palette, the minimalist approach to those palettes, big shapes, flat, but brisk, painted quickly, strongly. Yeah, she's looking at those guys among other people. Not exclusively, but this is an example of painters that she's looking at. One of the biggest movements of the 1960s, if not the biggest, anybody want to guess? Okay, good. It's pop art. Pop art. Think Andy Warhol. Yeah, but don't think about him too much. It's not good for you. Okay? There are plenty. Warhol gets very big in the 60s, and there are other pop artists who get very big as well. Lichtenstein. And an artist who doesn't get so big then, but still alive and quite well known at this point, is Alex Katz. And Alex Katz is very typical of a pop artist in that he used simplified color, flat planes, a recognizable subject. I mean, this is like taken from the advertising world, which that's a world of images. Let's not forget. People that were doing illustration were creating images, but they used the recognizable, the immediate, the flat, and of course, Matisse had shown us how to be flat and all of that stuff, but they applied it to everyday subjects. What could be more everyday than a house by the side of the road and trees? And Alex Katz gives us a very homey view of something that we know, and it's healthy, and it's safe, it's explorable. What's not to like? Well, people who like detail thought it was not so much. Maud thinks this is an interesting approach. And you'll see pop art start to creep into her work. And this is a really fine example, and it's in the show. And so you get the flat color, the red of the awning, the yellow siding of the house, and hard edges. Everything is recognizable, but what else do you get that Warhol could not do if you did it for him? Is she gives us a complex psychological drama in the mix of that pop art. So you get this tree, bisects the image practically in the center, which is something in art school we were always told, don't do that. It's the bullseye effect. Yeah, Maud didn't care. So she puts the tree in the middle, and the old man mimics the tree almost exactly. I mean, his trousers might as well be the trunk, and he's stiff and unmoving, and you can tell by that look on his face, I don't want to come in. I mean, it's kind of clear. And she's coming out from the house, clearly walking towards him, smile on her face. I know I'm building the narrative here, but I think I'm being helped along, yes, by the painting. She's coming along to say, hey, soup's on, time to come in, and, she's going to make everything okay, because there's been, with all this lightness and light and greenery, something's wrong. Not all is okay in paradise. So the image, the colors in the color scheme and the home and the trees, and she's wearing a pink dress, for crying out loud. You must be happy, right? But something's wrong. And again, this is Gatewood, I think, at her best, where she's doing one thing stylistically, but she's handing you a bowl of ambiguity. You don't really know, but you have a sense, right? You have a clue that not is all right. So she's going beyond the obviousness of a cat's. She's not a cats doesn't make cats bad. It's just a different kind of painting. But she's going into the realm of psychological drama. And I don't know. It makes paintings, you want to return to them like a good novel. Okay, where did some of this deep thinking come from? Maud got a Fulbright to Germany in 1963. And she gets there, and of all people, she studies with Oskar Kokoschka. Some of you know Kokoschka's work. We're going to look at one. And she also takes art history. And I tell you, if you want to get your mind completely deranged, become an art historian. You read all this stuff. None of it really ever comes together. That's okay. She studies Heinrich Wölfflin. And Wölfflin was somebody that said artists are always of their time and place. They cannot get beyond it. Stylistically, thematically, or intellectually, theologically, you are stuck in your time and place. You just are. And then she also took classes with an art historian named Fritz Novotny, who wrote a book on Goya. And Novotny said, art also comes from inside, your psychological state. Now, Wölfflin might say your psychological state comes from time and place. Novotny disagreed. He felt that people had unique experiences growing up, whether with violence or loneliness or need or happy experiences as well, and that you could plumb those experiences for themes, and that would raise your art above time and place. And that's where the universal really was. If you want to explore what it was to be human, you had to look inside to do that. So, her time in Germany is critical to who she's going to become. Is she the artist? Has she found herself, quote unquote? I hate that phrase, really. Has she found herself yet? I'm going to say not yet. She's done some terrific work at this point, but she's going to become even more of a promoter, let's say, of what is most mysterious about being alive. Now, this is the Kokoschka from 1913. Moody, dark, spare, elegant. I mean, it's the kind of a thing where you look at a portrait like this and you think, well, that about sums it up. That's how I feel on a lot of days. And so here's Gatewood in the 60s, just a few years after she's been in Germany. By the way, she did that house painting also in the 60s. This is called Small Dark House. And you have kind of an intellectual provenance now, knowing that she's thought about Novotny, she's thought about Wölfflin, and a whole lot of other people. Maud was well-read. She studied art in addition to painting, right? So we get kind of what would Alex Katz have painted if he'd hung out with Fritz Novotny? That's kind of what you get. You get a dark house, one that there is no tree, there are no shrubs. There's a little window off to the side, and it's dark inside. There's not even any light coming out of this place. So it's dark inside, it's dark outside. Nothing. Are there people in it? Well, who knows? Why are we looking at this picture? Well, why are you? I'm not asking you to, but somehow you're compelled to. It's mysterious, is it not? It's enigmatic. And so the American experience, like looking at a house in America, you just don't know what's going on. That's the reality of this painting. That's what it's suggesting. I have, on occasion, referred to Maud as something like a great Southern writer, great Gothic novelist. She takes this experience being human, with all its dark sides and weird sides, and puts it out there. And it's irresistible, isn't it? Could be a PBS special. And this is Maud Gatewood, also in the 60s, right around the same time. And this is important to note in figuring out Maud Gatewood, or approaching Maud Gatewood. We'll never figure her out. Is she vacillates back and forth between these looser styles, like a expressionist, figurative approach, and this hard edge thing. She's doing them both at the same time. Important to note about this is that she does not feel beholden to one style over another. Like, I have to be this to get famous. Like, I have to stay on this path and be known for this. She's not doing that. She goes back and forth. And then she starts to mix them up. And things get really ever more complex with her, right? When you're in art school, oftentimes you're told if you want to get known for something, you got to stick with it. She never told her students that, ever. So anyway, in this piece, is there ambiguity? I'm going to say yes, because people don't usually spend a lot of time standing naked in a corner. I mean, I've done it on occasion until I realized, hey, what am I doing? Probably ought to get dressed. But so she's got a figure standing here in a room, clothes hung over a chair in the front, doors that are open, and I don't know how well of a bead you can draw on the face, how clearly you can see it, but it's downward drooping eyes and a downward drooping mouth. Something, again, is amiss. Something's not right here, right? And there's a lot of light in this piece. There's a lot of color. And you know who I think of as the French painter Bonnard, who painted his wife all the time, over and over and over. And I think that's a Bonnard kind of composition. But Bonnard was all about, the sensual pleasure of his paintings. Once you see this face, it's a buzzkill, which is an art historical term, right? It takes the edge off emotionally. It pulls it down into a solemn scene. Okay, I want to show you another comparison. This is a Paul Warner, another Western painter who was dabbling in an expressionist style with a figure. Paul Warner later became a hardcore realist, painting very realistic still life. He left the figure and he left this style altogether, just FYI. But for a while, he was just this fabulously loose painter with a wonderful sense of color and light. And I look at these two paintings, and, as an art historian, they're looking at similar artists, and they're looking at each other, except I think the looking's only one way. I think it's Maud looking at Warner, because Warner doesn't know about Maud, because Maud's off in the South, and she's a woman. She's not getting in the magazines with paintings that are every bit as good as Warner's. She's in a different place. And that is how it is. Art is also a business. We're not going to get into that because that would be a whole separate talk, and it wouldn't be free. Right? So anyway, I talked about the things that Maud would tell her students, and she would, she told them a lot of the same things that she told Ivy, that a lot of you aren't going to be artists. A lot of you are going to, be secretaries and policemen and maybe a judge. Maybe some of you might be a doctor. But that doesn't mean that when you make choices and you think about things that you can't think about them creatively, and that there are possibilities. There are always possibilities, and possibilities are always multiple. And all around her in her career, in North Carolina, but throughout America, were painters doing that very realistic thing where the only possibility, the only outcome, was making this look like the photograph. And so you really had no possibilities if you're a photographic painter. You only have one. If you ever thought about how narrow that really is, here's the possibility. This. And then you're done. And Maud is like, no. Possibilities are always multiple. By the way, she smoked when she taught. Okay, this is Maud, a dappled view. And this is intriguing because, again, she goes back to flatness in her work. I find this still ambiguous because when I look at something like this, and I've never seen it before, I'm not sure exactly what I'm looking at. It takes me a second to realize that's the shoreline, and then that's the water going out. At first, I think I'm looking at a TV, you know, like in the 50s and 60s when it started to fuzz out at night. That never happens anymore. Unfortunately, kids don't get to grow up with this. But this is in my mind. But then you see, okay, this is a tree of sorts. Very flat, very hard-edged, and all of her dappled light is very geometric and very tight, very tense. She's interested in design as well as fluidity. You know, kind of geometric design, a hard-edged design. She loves them both. And again, she's going to vacillate back and forth throughout her career. And who is this on the right but Mr. Katz? Now, am I making an argument that she copied Katz? Not at all. I think Katz and Gatewood looked at similar art for sure, but I also think Maud saw Katz and saw the possibilities in his work and adapted some of it. Okay, this is, for me, Maud Gatewood at her best. This is an image where you see a tunnel, and when the first time I saw this, I did not know what I was looking at. Did you? I mean, be honest. I mean, because it's this big shape, I thought at first it was a gigantic eye, and she was being clever, and like that's the pupil in the middle. But it's a tunnel, and you see the edge of the tunnel in the upper left. You're going into it. So all of these dots are snow. But they're all, you know, snowflakes don't fall in straight lines. Shouldn't care. That's not the point. She uses snow to create a geometric pattern that repeats and moves. And then you see the snow again through the other side where there's the light. And psychologically, being stuck in a dark tunnel, for a lot of people, is frightening. You know, you ever get in a tunnel and you just find yourself wanting to get out? See the other side? You're not necessarily afraid of tunnels, but you just as soon be out. I get in a tunnel and I think, what if there's an accident and I'm stuck here? You know, get me out. You know, it's confining and dark, but there's this soft light on the other side, and there's nobody there. There's not another car, there's not another person, there's no house. You are all alone. And this painting, to me, she creates just magically a kind of an infinite silence. There's just like no sound, no person, but you're still going somewhere, you're doing something. And that becomes wildly enigmatic to me. Why are you out here in the middle of what must be nowhere, in the winter, in the cold, doing this thing? You have no idea where Maud is going with this. So anyway, I think it is Gatewood at her best, where she wraps her style around her affinity for enigma and mystery and possibility, and she blends them all together so effectively. Now, can you do that all the time? You might as well ask a golfer why they just don't hit holes in one all the time, because then you'd have an 18 score and you'd win. Because it doesn't work that way. Hole in one is just once in a while, and there's a lot of luck involved. And in painting, I've heard a lot of painters say it's something very similar. Sometimes the greatest thing you did, you just woke up with it in your head, and there it was, and you don't really know. Of course, your head is working all the time. That's another topic. Can't get into the cognitive side of things. So this is Sylvia Slay, an artist you probably don't know. But at this point in the talk, I want to bring up the idea, well, what if Maud had gone to New York? Right? What if she had just uprooted, you know, because she was tough. You know, she was fearless. She could have gone to New York, got an apartment, and competed with all these guys in New York for gallery space. Okay. Women artists, and I knew Sylvia Slay pretty well, women artists who lived in New York through the 60s, and I'm going to stretch this out to say throughout the world in the 60s, the glass ceiling was really, really low. Women were summarily left out of almost everything just by matter of course. It was just a given, and you had no recourse. Sylvia Slay was married to Lawrence Alloway. Lawrence Alloway was the most prominent contemporary critic in New York at the time. She was married to him. So Alex Katz, Warhol, Lichtenstein, she knew all these guys. And every time when there was a show, how many times did Sylvia get in? Never. Not a fair situation. So the question is, if Maud had gone to New York, and I don't like asking this question because it didn't happen. As an historian, I deal with what happened, right? Maud didn't go to New York. But Sylvia was there, married to a major critic, lived there her whole life, and found herself excluded throughout most of her life. She lived to be, almost 100, and she got an honorary lifetime award from the College Art Association shortly before she died. And I'm just thinking, a little bit late. Could have paid a little more attention earlier on. I'm thinking, because of the comparison with Slay and Gatewood, and they just were not all that different. This is Maud on the right, of course. A woman outside seated, same light, similar palette, similar approach. I'm thinking, as tough as Maud was, she would have met that full-on, insurmountable sexism that kept women out of the arts so effectively for so long in such great numbers. Did it keep them all out? No. But there's always a backstory. When somebody got successful, there's always an interesting backstory to that. Anyway, I'm very down on that period for women artists and what they had to confront. Anyway, back to Maud. I wish she would have kept up more of that tunnel in the snow, because it's so powerful, so effective. And psychologically, that idea of the darkness is only temporary, and then there's this opening to something else. It's another place. It's another experience. It's another state of mind that you're going to be in. That's pretty majestic visual poetry. That was a very nice sentence. Did you notice that? I did not read that. It just came out. But she doesn't. She doesn't stay there. And, you can't tell artists what to do. Art historians would love to go back in time and tell artists what to do. We don't get to do that. So this is Maud Gatewood in 1974. She continues to look at other artists. And I don't need to tell you what she's looking at, who she's looking at here. I mean, this is a Grant Wood that's at Ranolda House. It's a very near copy. Once in a while, an artist, gets influenced by a painting and gets a little too close, right? It happens. Warhol made an entire fantastic career out of copying everything. No one seems to mind. But anyway, I think the lesson here is if you're going to steal big, go big. 1976, just a couple of years later, Maud returns in just powerfully in big form, great form. A little night painting where this geometric, pattern at the center is just clouded. It's shrouded right in darkness, and all of these shades of gray move around this pattern. And I can't help but be transported to every late night I set up, writing a paper or worrying about a problem. It just captures that atmosphere of solemnity. But for me, and maybe it's because I've seen too many Maud paintings, it remains emotionally edgy. I don't feel happy looking at this painting. Again, it's quiet, but in a somber and a serious way. It's moody. And it's moody over what? Well, she doesn't say. She can tell you. But it is, and it works. I mean, you're compelled by it. You have to look. Okay. 1982, this painting called Mirror Image. And this is the 1980s. I lived through, like everybody here, I think. I'm going to go out on a limb. We've all lived through the 80s, right? So for me, living through the 80s, what a decade for the arts. Oh, my God. It couldn't end fast enough. Okay? So everything was wrong with the 80s. I mean, gigantic hair and ABBA. So this is not enigma. It is not mystery. This is a woman blow drying her hair with a blow dryer. So it's very factual, isn't it? You see that it's a figure, and you see what she's doing, and there's the blue wallpaper, and I get it instantly. And for me, and I'm talking, it doesn't mean it's not beautiful or attractive. I'm not talking beauty. I'm not talking attractive. Don't confuse what I'm saying. I'm saying it's obvious. It's obvious what it is. And there's no real enigma, in my view, here. There's nothing baffling, nothing mysterious. There's no double entendre. And the thing about a blow dryer is you instantly dated your painting. And that wallpaper, I don't know, did somebody actually sell that to her? And there are people that are going to like this painting. That's fine. Not one of my favorites, but because I'm drawn to other things in Maud Gatewood. I mean, when I look at Maud Gatewood, I'm looking for that enigma, mystery, double entendre, moodiness, just being baffled. And I really love the Southern Gothic shtick, especially when she nails it. This is none of those things. And so through the 80s, you're going to get a lot of this. And again, if you look back on the 80s, we were sort of seduced by, I don't know what, but it wasn't good. Whatever was in the air for that entire time. This is late afternoon, May. Again, a perfectly attractive painting. I mean, I'm not saying technically fine, but it's not the Gatewood that I've been talking about. In this, 1986, this to me looks like the cover of a Jackie Collins novel. Like maybe this is called Lightening Up a Dress. And, when I would talk to Maud, there are times when I wanted to say to her, why did you paint this? But I didn't, because I was afraid of her. But I should have, and because I just, this is not, what are you doing? But, I mean, it's well painted. Again, don't confuse issues. It's well painted, and, you could say, okay, yeah, it's moody, but you know what? It's very narrative, as opposed to being mysterious. It's telling you what's going on. So anyway, the 80s, let's rush to the end. 87, she takes the painting of the woman with the blow dryer and puts it in another painting. Now this I kind of think is Maud getting back to being Maud a little bit. But a couple of problems. One is that the nude figure grows straight out of her head. Now, she surely saw this when she was drawing it and conceiving it. And I think it had to be very intentional in that, is this woman part of me? Like a very heavy-handed metaphor, like visually making it look like she's part of me, she's coming out of my head. She on my mind, literally sitting on the top of my head, possibly. But at least in this painting, Maud is looking at herself, and I think she's 53 years old at the time she did this. And she's kind of got that look like, was this me before? Was I this vivacious? Was I this happy? I think it almost, on a second look, it becomes kind of sentimental to me. Or is she the object of my desire? Or is she none of these things? Could be none. At least this is Maud getting back into a questioning mode with no clear answers. Still not a fan of the 80s, but this one is more searching than the last. I think head and shoulders. And the North Carolina Museum of Art acquired this painting, and the director at the time really got on me for not liking the painting. He said, you can't say bad things about this publicly, because I got it for the museum. That's how things go in the art world. They're not always really deep. Okay, so this is 1989, and the 80s are about to mercifully come to an end. And Maud gives us a painting called Ugly Saturday, and this is one that I came very nearly, I had mustered the courage to say why. I mean, nothing could be more off-putting than a bunch of guys in white hoods with their Confederate flags in an ugly parade, in an ugly rally. But we know this. We don't need a painting to tell us this. So your painting here doesn't have an informational edge to it. It's not enlightening. It doesn't give us any insights into why these guys are grotesque. We know why they are. And Maud might have said, look, I know art doesn't change the world, but this is my world. It is a scene from what I know. And I would have said, okay, but you didn't have to paint it. But she did. And artists do what they're going to do. And so she felt compelled to paint this. I think it's a part, again, of Maud's career that, again, veers away from what poetically she's best at, which is the mystery and the rest of it, right? This is right on the surface. It's wearing her message on her sleeve, right? And so I had that conversation with her in a roundabout way. She was willing to at least, think about it. I asked her if she knew the work of Thomas Hart Benton, and that's how, we kind of talked around it, and of course she did. And I said, Benton realized his art never changed anybody. It only illustrated the problems of America. It didn't fix racism or the KKK or any of that. And she said, yes, I know. I get that. But she didn't have a definitive statement as to why she might be compelled to repeat something in a Benton-esque formula. And that's okay. Here's the point about bringing this up. Maud didn't stay in that single box that art dealers want you to stay in. Like, look, we can sell all your flower pieces. Don't do any nudes. And the artist will say, okay, fine. Maud painted what she wanted to paint. For whatever reason she was going to paint something, she did it. And she did the hard edge, and she did the fluid stuff, and then she did constructions, and she did drawings, and she did prints. And she was not beholden to any dealer in terms of what she was going to do, or any art historian, or any museum. And that is a very tough row when you're an artist if you want to make a living at it. She didn't do it. Getting very close to the end of the talk here, this is a Maud Gatewood 1990, and this is a piece that is in the show. And I wanted to kind of get close to the end with this because this to me is the quintessential Maud Gatewood. It's not as if she didn't have this kind of expressive power all throughout her career. That's one of the reasons to think so keenly about this one. She never lost her ability to create baffling, enigmatic scenes. In this one, she mixes soft edges of clouds cascading down in what we call cloud streets into a very dark, very shrouded suburban street. And you can't see it here. So I hope all of you have been to the show and you know the show. But right there is the head of a man. He's got a red hat on. Now, this is just terrific, right? Why is this guy up in the middle of the night? And why is he walking around your street? And why is he looking across the street and at the windows? This cannot be good. Is he lost? You're kind of a big guy to be lost. Your big hat. Are you just getting a breath of fresh air on the street? Why wouldn't you be in the forest or in your porch or some other place? You're obviously out in the street. This is weird. And yet, it's really so that the subtle grays that get dark and dark, and then that slight evanescence of light on the road. I mean, it's just gorgeous. I mean, technically, I like looking at it. Thematically, I'm drawn in by this weird story. The combination is just irresistible to me because she's talking about her world. My world here in the South, and it gets weirder every place else as well, but the South has kind of made its contribution to weirdness, right? And this to me is, if there's a Gothic painter, it's Maud Gatewood, a Southern Gothic poet, visual poet. It's her. And this painting is a summa in that context. Okay. My point... that guy. That's what I call him. The point here is not to make a specious comparison between the two artists. I'm not trying to say she was looking at Van Gogh, though she certainly knew him well. All painters do. And what you could do with the sky, she knew him well. But the difference, both of these are highly evocative, right? Both of them draw you in because the atmosphere that Van Gogh creates is so magical. Whereas over here, emotionally, it's clearly dark, right? And this is one that, you could dream on this painting and write a beautiful, song about this painting. This one, maybe not so much, maybe a dirge or something. But Maud saw possibilities. When she saw art like Van Gogh throughout her life, all the things she ever saw could be reinvented in a different way, in a different context. And she would be the first to admit that the art that you make is who you are, right? All the experiences you ever had, all of them, not just the art you saw and the art you made, everything you ever did, every conversation you ever had, everything you ever ate, every bowl of cereal, every cigarette you ever smoked is who you are. And you bring that to bear on the image that you're going to make. For Maud, meaning in life was experience. Experience and meaning were the same thing. Who you are in the life you live, that's the meaning of your life right there. That's it. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to wrap their head around because they want meaning to be someplace, somewhere, that you go find, like in a box or on the top of a hill with a Maharishi or something. Just meaning isn't something you find. Meaning is what you have done, what you do, and what you will do, who you are. I love it. So I marvel over both of these paintings, and I think about their different lives that brought Van Gogh to his place and Maud to her place. And we realize that Maud's experience was so much like ours, so American, so Southern, right? So loaded with our geography as opposed to the geography of Norway and the, places in Europe. She managed to capture more than she ever thought she could. And one of the most poignant things that she ever told me, and I love this, is that artists are often the last one to understand their own work. And I wanted to say, you're damn right. I didn't. I said, well, that's interesting. But she's got a point. Artists are creating based on everything they've ever done, thought, experienced in any way. And that meaning could be blending with meanings from your teenage years, from your childhood years, to books you read about the 12th century. And then there it is. And if you ask somebody, why did you paint this exactly this way? Well, how could they even begin to answer such a question? It's not really answerable because you cannot look inside your mind. If you can, you've got to publish that tomorrow and be rich. You cannot see the things that you're thinking. It's impossible. So Maud knew a lot of these things, and another thing that she realized is, and this is a beautiful part of who she was, that your contribution, your enlivening the community, which is what Ivy taught her when she was young, does not stop when you die. Doesn't have to. And she funded the Art Center, the new Art Center at UNCG, formerly Women's College. And prior to that, the art building was a shoebox. And really kind of, Randall Jarrell, the poet, used to call the building where the arts were, I think he called it the Ajax Motel. Anyway, something very close to that. It was a terrible place. Maud had her art classes in that terrible building. Now this is the Art Center at what was formerly Women's College. Maud made that possible. And there's a gallery in the middle of it called the Maud Gatewood Gallery. So I want to leave you with this image from the 70s, not the 80s. And it's big, and it's bold, and it's colorful. And when I first look at it, I think it's an abstraction because it's this swirl of geometry and color just moving at me, like a freight train. And to my eyes, this kind of painting is a visual feast. When I happen upon a painting like this in a museum, I'm just thrilled because it seems to come out of nowhere with its strength and its complexity. And it's fully professional in terms of how it was painted and fully poetic in terms of how it was conceived. That is another really nice sentence. It's being recorded. Okay. So her legacy is multiple. She had a great influence on her students, on her community, especially when she served on city councils in Caswell County, and as a patron of the arts, an enormous legacy. But I think we might all agree that her biggest legacy is as a visual artist. She has given us a view, a body of work that gives us a view of the American South at a time and a place where she seems to have fully understood things that can't be understood. Like she knew the things she couldn't know, that people couldn't know, and couldn't even speak about. And she grew up with that, as perhaps some of you have, where so many things just remained unspoken for so long. That was an influence on her, make no mistake about it. So there's a final thing I want to say, and what is it? We've talked about Maud tonight in the context of where does she fall with her peers in American art and her numerous contributions. And I think that the thought I'd like to leave you with tonight is that this show and the good work that the museum has done on this show, including in the building but also online, has contributed to an effort where we can all begin to take the Maud Gatewoods of America, including Maud Gatewood herself, and begin to discuss them as American artists, not as North Carolina artists or Caswell County artists or graduates of UNCG. However important that is, Maud Gatewood was fully an American artist. Thank you.